She signed the divorce papers without blinking, the same papers that once led to her death. This time Sophia Green wasn't heartbroken. She was reborn. With $90 million in her account and fire in her veins, she set out not to heal, but to ruin. The moment he pushed the divorce agreement across the table toward me, I knew I had been given a second chance. "I think we both know this isn't working anymore," Ryan said, voice smooth, impassive. "Let's not drag it out." His words echoed just like they had the first time. But this wasn't the first time. This was the second. And this time, I was ready. My hand didn't tremble. My breath didn't hitch. I didn't plead or cry. Instead, I calmly picked up the pen and signed my name. Sophia Green. That's who I was. That's who I am. But the woman sitting across from Ryan today wasn't the same naive girl who once believed love could withstand indifference, betrayal, and abandonment. This time I wasn't here to hold on. I was here to let go, with precision. Ryan stared at the page, not even hiding his surprise. "You're sure?" he asked. "Incredibly." He paused, searching my face for some trace of weakness. "Sophia, I know this isn't easy. I'm not trying to hurt you. I just think." "You've made your decision," I interrupted, keeping my tone soft. "And I've accepted it." What he didn't know, what he would never know, is that in my previous life I had refused. I had clung to this marriage like it was a lifeline, even as it dragged me into the depths of despair. I begged him not to go. Pleaded for just a little more time. I believed if I loved him enough he'd stay. I was pregnant then. High risk, the doctor had said. I'd been scheduled for an emergency procedure. I had called Ryan, terrified, desperate for him to be by my side. But Shane Lee's child had caught a cold that day. So Ryan left me in a hospital bed and ran to her. While I lay bleeding, my child dying inside me, he held Shane's hand and cradled another man's son. By the time he arrived, I was gone. Dead. And now here we were again. Same room. Same table. Same divorce papers. But I was no longer the woman who died waiting. I looked up and smiled faintly. "Do you have the financial terms prepared?" He blinked, caught off guard. "Yes. I've arranged everything. The villa in Westmount is yours. The Crest Lane penthouse too. 2 commercial units in Halden Square. And you'll receive $1 million per year as part of the divorce maintenance." I nodded, slowly flipping through the pages. I even let my eyes glass over just a little. I needed him to believe I was still fragile. Still aching. I could have laughed. $1 million a year? I didn't want strings. I wanted freedom. "Ryan," I said quietly, tracing the clause with a single finger. "I'd prefer a clean break." His brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "No annual allowance. Just give me the full amount now as a lump sum." He leaned back, jaw tightening. "You want the full $50 million at once?" I tilted my head slightly. "You've always said money's not an issue." He didn't respond right away. He was trying to read me, figure out my angle. Maybe he thought I was stalling, trying to buy time to win him back. That's what I did before, after all. Good. Let him think that. Let him believe I was still the same pathetic woman who would fold with a single glance. I don't want to keep coming back to you for money," I added, allowing my voice to catch. "It's humiliating enough." That was the line that did it. I saw the flash of guilt in his eyes. Brief. Shallow. But enough. "All right," he said after a beat. "1 payment. $50 million. But that's it, Sophia. No more." "Of course." He nodded toward his assistant standing silently by the door. "Have legal add a clause for immediate lump sum payment. She's waiving the annual arrangement." The assistant stepped out to make the call. I stared down at the document again, tracing my name with the tip of the pen. In my past life, that name had died with me. In this one, it would become something else entirely. A signature of survival. And war. "I'll arrange the transfer by the end of the day," Ryan said. I didn't thank him. Not because I wasn't grateful, but because I wasn't. This wasn't generosity. This was an exchange. A transaction. And he had no idea how expensive it was going to get. A few moments passed in silence. I wiped at my eye gently, letting a single tear fall, just one. He needed to believe I was still mourning. "I never wanted this," I whispered. "I know. I would have stayed, even if you lost everything." That wasn't a lie. In my last life, I stayed through the bankruptcy, through the disgrace. I gave him a kidney when his own body began to fail. I believed love was sacrifice. But sacrifice didn't save me. It destroyed me. I looked up, letting my lips quiver just barely. But Shane needs you now, right? His face tightened. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. That silence said everything. He didn't love me. He never did. He loved the idea of me, a loyal, convenient stand-in. A quiet shadow behind his spotlight. And now that Shane was back, fresh from her ruined marriage, pretending to be fragile, Ryan was all too ready to be her hero again. He always did fall for tears that weren't mine. I'll sign the revised agreement once it's ready, I said, rising from my chair. Ryan stood as well, surprised by how quickly I moved. Sophia. Don't worry, I interrupted with a soft, bitter smile. I'm not going to make this messy. He looked almost disappointed. I didn't give him time to recover. As I stepped out of his office, heels clicking softly against the marble floor, I felt no sadness. Only clarity. I had just signed away a name, a title, a man. What I gained was far greater. Power. Capital. And a future he would never be able to afford. It was done. The ink was barely dry when Ryan's assistant emailed the confirmation. All properties and accounts were ready for transfer. Westmount Villa. Crest Lane Penthouse. 2 commercial properties in Halden Square. $90 million, liquid, wired directly into my private account. I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the documents and numbers on my laptop. If I smiled too wide, I might lose control, so I bit the inside of my cheek and reached for a tissue instead. My hand trembled, intentionally, as I pressed it to my cheek and whispered to the empty room, I didn't think it would hurt this much. There were no mirrors in front of me, but I knew what I looked like. Pale, broken, trembling. Exactly the way Ryan expected me to look. I reached for my phone and sent him a single message. I signed. Thank you, for everything. The perfect ex-wife. Gracious. Heartbroken. Letting go. I deserved an award. 30 minutes later he called. I didn't answer. A message came through instead, this time urgent. Emergency. Emery's collapsed. I'm taking Shane to Easton Memorial. Might need to postpone filing. I exhaled through my nose. Of course. It was happening again. Just like before. Another fabricated emergency. Another damsel cry from Shane. And Ryan, ever the self-appointed hero, went running. The first time this happened I was pregnant. Lying in a hospital bed. Bleeding. Crying. Waiting. He chose her then. He would choose her again now. But this time I wouldn't wait. I grabbed my coat, heels and bag. Then paused long enough to make one quiet phone call to a local media contact I had kept in my back pocket. Ryan. Hospital. Legal wife. Mistress. Pediatric wing. You'll want your best photographer. The woman didn't even ask for clarification. She just said, on it. When I stepped into the wide marble lobby of Easton Memorial, the air was humming with tension. 2 journalists with disguised cameras were already pretending to be family health reporters. One was adjusting a mic. The other feigned interest in a blood pressure kiosk. Perfect. The front desk nurse pointed me toward the pediatric waiting area. And there they were. Shane Lee, white cardigan, perfectly disheveled hair, no smudged mascara. She was going for mother under stress. But her face was smooth, composed. Her son, Emery's, sat beside her with a slight rash on his arm, casually kicking his heels against the bench. No medical staff. Nothing serious. And Ryan? He was crouched beside her, gently rubbing her back like they were the ones going through a divorce. I stood there for exactly 4 seconds before walking toward them. No hesitation. Just impact. My open palm landed squarely on Shane's face. She gasped. Maurice jumped. Ryan shot up from the floor. Sophia, are you crazy? Not anymore, I said loud and steady. Shane clutched her cheek, frozen in disbelief. She's lying, I said, raising my voice for the cameras I knew were pointed right at us. Again. Ryan stepped between us. Sophia, stop this. Oh, I'm sorry, I said, voice sweet like venom. Did she tell you the child collapsed? Wasn't breathing? Had to be rushed in for emergency treatment. I gestured to the child, who was now munching on a packet of crackers. Looks like he's in critical condition. The reporters leaned in, now recording openly. I caught one flicking his wrist subtly, already capturing the angle. Shane started to cry. You don't understand, he had an allergic reaction. Oh, now it's a rash? I laughed, a bitter, wild sound. You fake an emergency, pull my husband, no ex-husband, out of signing a divorce agreement, and I'm the crazy one? You're humiliating yourself, Ryan snapped. Let's talk somewhere else. No, I said sharply. Let's talk here in front of everyone. And that's when he did it. Ryan's hand shot up. Fingers curled. Arm raised. He was about to strike me. For the second time in my life, I watched the man I had once loved turn violent. But this time I was ready. Because right then the camera flashes exploded like fireworks. Hick, hick, hick. He froze midair, hands suspended like a criminal caught in the act. I tilted my head, looking him square in the eyes. Do it, I whispered. Let the world see who you really are. His hand dropped like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The reporters had their headline. Security arrived moments later. One of the nurses tried to defuse the tension, but the damage was irreversible. Ryan's assistant was already on the phone, likely trying to scrub footage from the internet before it spread. Too late. My journalist friend would make sure the raw files hit every major tabloid by morning. As the guards ushered everyone apart, I made sure my final words were heard. Shane, I said, voice cool, next time you want to stage an emergency, pick a better setting. One with fewer witnesses. I looked at Ryan one last time. You almost had it all, I said. You just couldn't stop choosing the woman who ruins everything. And with that, I turned on my heel and walked out of Easton Memorial, every step deliberate and soundless, like a goodbye I didn't need to say twice. Back in the car, I looked at my phone. It buzzed with a message from the same reporter. Got everything. Front page by sunrise. That slap? Cinematic. I laughed under my breath, finally letting my mask slip for the first time all day. My cheeks ached from feigning sadness. My throat was dry from whispering fake tremors. But my heart, it was steady. Calm. Exactly where it needed to be. I arrived back at the civil affairs office before Ryan did. This time I didn't dress like a grieving ex-wife. I wore black wide-leg trousers, a dark blue blouse, no jewelry, and not a single trace of makeup. Not because I wanted to look devastated, but because I wanted to look clinical. Functional. Like a woman going through the motions. The receptionist led me to the waiting area. I didn't sit. I stood by the window, watching a leaf twitching along the sidewalk, pushed by wind but never settling. Ryan arrived 10 minutes later, alone. When he saw me, his stride slowed. He was expecting tears. I could tell. Expecting red-rimmed eyes, maybe a trembling voice begging him for a last conversation, a final moment of warmth. Instead, I turned to him and nodded. Ready? He stared at me for a beat too long. You don't want to talk first? What's left to say? A flicker of unease crossed his face. Sophia, I know this isn't easy. You've said that before, I replied, voice flat. You also said you hoped I'd be okay. He shifted his weight. I do. I smiled tightly. Then let's get on with it. For both our sakes. Inside the office, the clerk looked bored. She flipped through our paperwork with the same energy she might apply to a parking ticket. Everything's in order, she mumbled. Are you both consenting to divorce without coercion? Yes, Ryan answered. Yes, I echoed. She handed us pens and turned the file so our names faced us. Ryan hesitated. I didn't. I picked up the pen and signed without blinking. As though I were confirming a package delivery, not ending an 8-year marriage. He watched me. Something in his face cracked, not guilt, not longing. More like confusion. You're handling this very well, he said slowly. Should I be throwing things? I asked, keeping my tone soft. Would that make you feel better? That's not what I meant. I met his gaze. You're surprised I'm not falling apart. You always said I was your everything. You were, I said. That was my mistake. His jaw tightened. Good. I waited while he signed next. The clerk processed the final document, stamping it loudly with the red-inked seal of finality. There you go, she said. You're no longer legally bound. She handed me a pale pink envelope with the certificate inside. I held it gently, like it was something sacred. Ryan rubbed the back of his neck. Sophia, I just want to say. I cut him off. Don't. He blinked. I know what you want to say. And I don't need it. His brow furrowed, but I gave him nothing to latch on to. I hope you and Shane have a beautiful wedding, I added, my voice dipped in honey. I heard third tries are the charm for women like her. That hit the mark. His lips parted but no words came. You always said I was too quiet, I continued, slipping the certificate into my bag. Maybe if I had cried louder, you wouldn't have missed the sound of someone else's tears. His shoulders tensed. Goodbye, Ryan, I said simply, brushing past him. By the time I stepped outside, I had already opened my banking app. The wire had come through that morning. $90 million sitting silently in my offshore account. My property deeds were being couriered that afternoon to my legal proxy. Everything was moving. And now it was my turn to move too. When I returned to the villa, mine now officially, I didn't unpack or wander the marble halls like a tourist in a castle. I went straight to my home office, locked the door and opened 3 laptops. Each machine was preset to access different global investment accounts. I didn't need help. I didn't need advisors. I had something better. I had hindsight. In my past life, after Ryan's betrayal and our bankruptcy, I spent nights alone with nothing but financial news and regret for company. I remembered patterns. I remembered headlines. And I remembered one story in particular. A tiny biotech firm no one cared about until they signed a breakthrough licensing deal that skyrocketed their value 2,000% in 60 days. I knew the name. I knew the date of the announcement. And I knew it was only 2 weeks away. So I didn't wait. I logged into the primary account. I took $50 million, just over half, and poured it all into one stock. A single gamble to anyone else. But not to me. To me it was inevitability. To me it was prophecy. As the final order confirmed, a message blinked across the screen. Purchase complete. Hold 3.2 million shares. I stared at it for a long time. And then I leaned back in my chair, heart still steady, lips curled into a slow, silent smile. The divorce was done. The performance complete. No. Now the empire began. 2 months later my account balance hit 9 zeros. $1,034,000,52 to be exact. I refreshed the screen 4 times just to watch the number blink back at me. That single stock, Virion Technologies, had tripled in value overnight after the licensing deal was confirmed. By the end of the week it exploded. Exactly as I remembered. And this time, I hadn't been a broke woman reading about it in a news app. I had been ahead of the game. This time I'd played it and won. I closed the laptop and sat in silence, staring out the window of my villa, where golden light flooded the marble floors. There were no shadows here. No crying in stairwells. No waiting for a man who would never come. Only peace. Only power. The next morning my phone buzzed with a news alert. CEO Ryan marries former flame Shane Lee in private ceremony at Crest Hill Estate. I didn't flinch. The article featured a blurry photo. Ryan in a gray tuxedo, Shane clinging to his arm in white lace, her expression demure, his like stone. She looked triumphant. Trapped. How poetic. He had finally married the woman he abandoned me for. The one he swore was just going through a hard time. The one who faked a child's illness to pull him from our divorce proceedings. Let them have each other. I sipped my tea and barely blinked. I thought the quiet would last longer. But then the past came knocking, wearing pearls and perfume and judgment like a designer coat. The call came around 3 p.m. I stared at the name on the screen and nearly laughed aloud. Mrs. Cross. Ryan's mother. The woman who once called me unsuitable at her dinner table. The woman who never once defended me as a daughter-in-law, only corrected my posture and my clothing choices. I answered anyway. Sophia, she said sharply. We need to talk. Face to face. I didn't ask why. I already knew. The cafe she chose was just as I remembered. Lace curtains, silver teaspoons, overpriced bitter tea. She sat near the window, back straight, chin high, draped in camel wool and disappointment. When I walked in wearing a fitted black suit and no makeup, her expression soured instantly. No wonder he left you, she muttered before I'd even sat down. You look like you haven't tried in months. I smiled. Hello to you too, Mrs. Cross. Her eyes flicked down to my wristwatch. The limited edition gold Cartier one that Ryan once said I didn't need. You're doing well for yourself, I see. I always did, I replied. You just never looked long enough to notice. She narrowed her eyes. Let's not pretend you didn't get lucky. Ryan gave you everything in the divorce. I tilted my head. And now he's giving everything to Shane. That made her flinch. Just a little. I leaned back, letting the silence build. She cracked first. She's ruining him, she hissed. Her spending is reckless. She meddles in everything. And she's turned Ryan into a stranger. He doesn't even speak to me anymore. My heart didn't stir. In another life maybe I would have been flattered. Or even sorry. No. I was just entertained. You wanted me gone, I said gently. You made that very clear. I didn't think he'd be stupid enough to marry someone like her, she snapped. And there was the real reason I was summoned. You want me to get rid of her for you, I said plainly. She didn't deny it. She's a manipulative leech, she said. You were the better match. At least you had class. If you were to come back into Ryan's life just enough to make Shane nervous. Stop, I said, cutting her off with a raised hand. She looked startled. I leaned forward, voice soft but steel-edged. The problem wasn't that I couldn't keep Ryan, I said. It was that I was foolish enough to want him in the first place. Mrs. Cross's lips tightened. I opened my purse and pulled out a small black USB drive. This, I said, placing it on the table between us, contains every dirty little secret Shane's been hiding. Affairs. Fraud. The reason her first husband divorced her. And the fact that her precious son isn't biologically Ryan's. Mrs. Cross stared at it like it might explode. I'm giving this to you, I said. Not because I want to come back, but because I want to watch from the sidelines when everything she's built turns to ash. She reached for it slowly like a woman touching power for the first time. But, I added, just in case you lose it. I reached into my phone and hit send. A scheduled email, already prepared, went out to 5 major newsrooms with attached evidence files. I smiled. It's already in the media pipeline. Mrs. Cross paled. I don't need to come back, Mrs. Cross, I said as I stood. You wanted a cunning daughter-in-law? Now you have one. I hope she gives you everything you deserve. And with that I left the cafe, never looking back. By the time I returned to the villa, my phone had already exploded with alerts. Shane Lee's shocking past exposed. Illegitimate child, financial fraud and more. CrossCorp's reputation faces turmoil as new wife's scandals surface. Ryan under fire. Did he know? I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the fireplace, the flames flickering low and warm. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was just the first course. It started with whispers, the kind that swirled beneath headlines like dirty fog. Then came the screenshots. Bank transactions that didn't match Shane's income, flights she shouldn't have afforded, and a long-forgotten paternity test with a falsified signature. Reddit caught fire. Twitter fumed. But it was Instagram that delivered the killing blow. A bitter ex-lover, not Ryan but a wealthy nightclub owner from her past, posted a full thread. She told me the child was mine, until she needed Ryan's name on the certificate. Ask her how she funded her boutique. Spoiler, it wasn't from savings. She's played this game before. Ryan just happened to be the dumbest one to fall for it. Photos followed, hotel receipts, jewelry she claimed was sponsored, and voice notes where Shane flirted, bargained, and confessed more than she ever should have. By dawn she was trending under #GoldDiggerQueen, #ShaneSkim, #Ryan deserved it. The Carters collapsed within days. Their long-held family brand, once pristine and quietly powerful, dropped out of every business registry in under a week. Corporate partnerships pulled out. Stockholders dumped shares like they were infected. Charities returned endowments. Banks retracted lines of credit. The elegant Carter crest that once stood for wealth and legacy, now it was synonymous with humiliation. And then came the press conference. I didn't attend, but I watched it live from my villa, feet tucked under me as I sipped fresh coffee. Mrs. Carter, always immaculately groomed, always arrogant, sat at the podium in a charcoal blazer flanked by lawyers. Cloaked, broken. Her voice cracked once before she steadied herself and spoke. The Carter family unequivocally distances itself from Shane Monroe and all her activities. She was never and will never be the future we envisioned. Our family has been betrayed, our reputation desecrated, and our son, her voice wavered again, blinded. I paused the video and took a moment to admire that sentence. Our son, blinded. No mention of fault. No apology. No ownership. But that was fine. I wasn't waiting for one. Ryan didn't show his face for 5 full days. Not until he was dragged out by paparazzi on a hotel balcony, drunk, barefoot, and screaming into the night. One of the photographers caught his exact words. "I gave her everything. I gave her everything and she sold me a lie." The next morning, every tabloid ran it. Every gossip site uploaded the clip. Ryan Carter, from CO to fool. I never messaged him. Never commented. Never called. I just watched. Quietly. Like a queen observing pawns fall in every direction. And though the satisfaction ran deep, deeper than any apology ever could, I didn't strike again. Not yet. Because I wanted them both to think it was over. I wanted them to scramble to rebuild, to hope they could escape this firestorm and start fresh in some faraway place. Only then would the final match be lit. That chance never came for Shane. Rumor said she tried to flee, cash in her jewelry, pawn off her car, even book a private jet using a fake ID. But she never made it to the airport. Because Ryan got to her first. The man who once left me mid-pregnancy for her now dragged her by the wrist into a courtroom, where a settlement was signed under sealed conditions. Whispers leaked within hours. She'd been handed over, not to police, not to prison, but to a man with money and no morals. A man who collects women the way others collect watches. Ryan didn't want her jailed. He wanted her used. When I heard, I didn't flinch. I didn't pity her. I didn't rejoice either. Because by then Shane Monroe wasn't worth an emotion. He was just discarded. Like the lies she built her life on. Me. I returned to my terrace, logged into my portfolio, and watched another investment climb quietly in the background. No news alerts. No drama. Just progress. Airports used to overwhelm me. The crowds. The waiting. The dragging of cheap suitcases behind me like weighted reminders that I didn't belong anywhere truly important. But not this time. This time I returned home in style. As the private jet's door lowered, a gust of warm air greeted my face. My silk scarf fluttered at my neck, the hem of my cream trench coat brushing against my ankles. Down on the tarmac, 3 black cars waited with tinted windows. Uniformed assistants stood ready with clipboards and tablet devices. One of them bowed slightly. "Welcome home, Ms. Green." The sound of it made something in me settle. Sophia Green, no longer a discarded wife. No longer a footnote in Ryan Carter's life. Now I was the headline. I descended the stairs slowly, every click of my heels deliberate. Composed. Grounded. Behind me trailed luxury shopping bags and luggage that cost more than my past life's yearly salary. And then, like poison creeping in just beneath the skin, a voice I hadn't heard in months. "Sophia." It wasn't warm. It was cold, coarse, and ruined. I turned. Ryan. Disheveled, bitter, and standing just outside the arrival hall like a ghost someone forgot to exorcise. His once immaculate suit hung loose on his frame. The sharp cheekbones that once made magazines now looked gaunt, sunken. His shoes were scuffed. His tie was wrinkled. And those proud eyes. Red-rimmed and cornered. "Well, look at you," he sneered, lips curling. "Didn't take long to upgrade, did it?" I held my ground, motioning my assistant to wait. "Still mistaking dignity for distance, I see," I said smoothly. "You look worn." He laughed, short, ugly. "And you look like a trophy someone forgot they already won." I didn't flinch. Or maybe I was never yours to begin with. He stepped closer, eyes bloodshot. "You think this makes you powerful? Jet-setting around with money you stole from me?" I tilted my head. "It wasn't theft. It was a divorce settlement. You signed it." "I was tricked," he spat. "You acted so heartbroken. I should have known it was all an act." "Heartbreak doesn't mean helplessness," I said coolly. "Though you seem to be well-versed in both." Ryan's jaw clenched. His voice dropped. "You'll be back to nothing, Sophia. Women like you always burn out." A sharp edge cut through my posture, but before I could speak, a warm, steady hand slid around my waist. "Excuse me," a male voice said calmly. "I believe you're disturbing a lady." I turned slightly and blinked. It wasn't Quinn. It was Daniel, my new private security lead. 6'4". Cordial. Deadly when needed. Ryan's face turned a darker shade. "Who the hell are you?" "I work for her," Daniel said smoothly. "Which means I don't have to answer to you." "She doesn't need you," Ryan sneered, stepping closer. "She's always played the victim. Just a manipulative little. He didn't finish the sentence. He swung. Fist. Desperate. It landed against Daniel's jaw. Solid hit. Daniel's head snapped back, but he didn't stumble. Didn't bleed. Didn't blink. He simply straightened, cracked his neck and said, "That was a mistake." His punch came swift, precise, controlled. Ryan went sprawling onto the polished airport floor, clutching his side, groaning. Gasps echoed around us. Phones were recording. Security rushed in. But it didn't matter. Daniel showed his badge. Licensed. Trained. Ryan just writhed on the floor like a toddler mid-tantrum. I crouched down beside him, sunglasses still on. "This is what you chose," I said quietly. "Not when you hit him. Not even when you cheated. But the first time you let someone else's pain feel irrelevant to you. You think this is over?" he hissed hoarse. "No," I said standing. "This was never about you." And I meant it. Truly. I had already buried the version of me that mourned what we lost. What stood now was only focused on what came next. I turned to Daniel. "Let's go." He nodded, leading the way, murmuring something into his mic. I walked forward, heels clicking. But just as I reached the doors, a voice slid into the air behind me, low and dangerous like velvet stretched over a blade. "You handle your return well, Sophia." I froze. That voice. It wasn't Ryan's. It was smooth, familiar, haunting in its precision. I turned slowly, and there he was. Clad in charcoal gray. An obsidian watch glinting under his coat. Standing in the crowd like he didn't belong to it, like he never had. His presence felt like thunder before the lightning. One corner of his mouth lifted. "Did you miss me?" The first time I met Quinn Shaw, I wasn't dressed for war. I was dressed for forgetting. It was exactly 2 years ago in a foreign city whose name I never learned to pronounce right. I had just escaped a conference where Ryan humiliated me publicly. Again. That night I walked into a private rooftop bar with a headache, a bitter heart and a bottle's worth of regret already blooming in my stomach. And there he was. Perched at the end of the bar. Dark-eyed. Silent. Watching me like he'd been waiting for something to break. We never exchanged last names. I don't even remember what excuse I gave when I took his hand. But I do remember how that night ended. Not in his arms but with a ring box open between us. Ridiculous, reckless. "Marry me," I had slurred, standing barefoot on a velvet couch, half laughing, half crying. He'd stared at me for a long time, lips quirked. Then said, "You sure?" "No," I'd said. "But I want someone to look at me like I matter." He didn't answer. He just leaned in, eyes serious. "Then I'll find you when you're sober." I had laughed. I thought it was a joke. I never expected him to mean it. Till now. Until he showed up outside my life in tailored suits and iron promises. Not as a stranger but as someone who remembered everything. "You were supposed to forget that night," I told him after he cornered me in the back hallway of a gala. Quinn didn't flinch. "You made me a promise." I was drunk. "You still meant it." I was grieving. "You still meant it." I swallowed hard. "That doesn't give you the right to chase me across countries." "I didn't chase," he said simply. "I followed a thread. One you tied yourself." I turned to leave but his voice caught me. "You left one man who controlled you with guilt," he said. "And now you're afraid of one who won't need guilt to keep you." I froze. The hallway was quiet, save for the faint music of the ballroom behind us. I turned slowly. "What do you want from me?" Quinn stepped closer, eyes shadowed. "To finish what you started." That night wasn't real. It was real to me. "And now what?" I asked tightly. "You just show up, declare ownership?" "I don't need to declare it," he said. "I'll prove it." He kept his word. He didn't bombard me with threats or theatrics. He simply appeared. At art shows. Business lunches. Even the morning I stopped at a flower market, he was already there, holding a bouquet of white hyacinths. "From memory," he said. I didn't take them. But the next morning they were on my desk anyway, perfectly arranged in a crystal vase. Then came the gifts. Not diamonds or dresses. It was worse. It was thoughtful. The antique sewing machine I once said reminded me of my grandmother. A first edition copy of the only poetry book I ever cried over. A private lunch arranged with the dean of a university that once rejected me. "Why are you doing this?" I finally asked him one night outside my townhouse, where he waited in the rain holding a single black umbrella. Quinn's answer was simple. You were mine before you knew who you were. And I don't let go of what's mine. I hated how my heartbeat responded. How I wasn't sure if it was fear or something deeper. A part of me screamed, this is another Ryan. Another man who wants to own you. But another part whispered, this one already knew you and still chose you. And that terrified me more. Because Quinn Shaw wasn't kind. He wasn't gentle. But he was patient. And patience in a man like him? That's more dangerous than rage. I didn't know what scared me more. That I might give in. Or that I might already have. Victory, I learned, doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it slips in quietly, dressed in silk and silence, and finds you sitting alone in your corner office, sipping espresso while the world you used to crawl through now bends politely at your doorstep. That morning the sun glinted off the skyline, casting a warm hue across the floor-to-ceiling glass windows of my private office. My name was etched into the marble wall behind me. Sophia Green, founder and CEO. Once I would have cried at the sight. Now I simply smiled. Because I had plans. And feelings, even triumphant ones, had no room in them. Quinn sat across from me, one leg crossed over the other, his usual smirk tucked just beneath the surface. But this time something about him had shifted. He didn't lean forward. He didn't impose. He watched. Like a man learning something new about a creature he'd thought he already understood. You've changed, he said finally, swirling the ace in his glass. No, I said. I've just peeled back the layers I used to wear to survive. You used to beg, he said. Cry. Be grateful for scraps. I used to believe love had to come with suffering. And now I know it doesn't have to come at all. He studied me carefully. I leaned back in my chair, deliberately calm. Let's talk business, I said. If you want to remain in my life, it will be on my terms. His brow quirked slightly. Terms. Yes, I said. No control. No ownership. No threats. I'm not your prize. I'm not your redemption. If you want proximity, you'll earn it. You think I'm after your heart? I think men like you always are, I replied evenly. But I'm not some trembling girl you rescued in a foreign bar. I'm the woman who made $1 billion out of ashes. Quinn didn't respond right away. Then quietly he laughed. Not mockingly. Not sarcastically. It was soft. And proud. You don't want a master, he said. I want a mirror, I answered. Someone who reflects my fire, not tries to extinguish it. He nodded once. I can be that. We'll see, I said, rising. For now the door stays open. But only if you know you can't close it behind me. Meanwhile the world was already burning, and not mine this time. Ryan Carter's name was splashed across every major headline. Former tycoon arrested in international trafficking scandal. Ex-wife sold mistress to foreign diplomat. Confessions unsealed. Carter Holdings crumbles under legal fallout. The investigation had moved quickly. After Shane's illegal relocation was leaked to the press, and then to the authorities, everything unraveled. Her history of blackmail, gold digging, and falsified identity records became public knowledge. She was found trying to flee the country with a forged passport, $500,000 in cash, and zero loyalty. Ryan was arrested 2 days later. Not for fraud, not for corruption, but for human trafficking. That final blow? It wasn't mine. It was karma. And karma didn't care if he screamed his innocence on national television. The cuffs still clicked. I watched the footage once, just once. His face bruised. His voice cracked. His lawyer silent. Then I closed the tab. And opened the next business proposal on my desk. Because I had empires to run. That evening I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window in my penthouse office, the city humming beneath me like it answered to my heartbeat. Behind me, Quinn approached, his presence quiet but undeniable. He didn't touch me. Didn't speak. Just stood beside me. A man of power who knew this moment didn't belong to him. You're not the woman I chased across oceans, he said finally. No, I replied. She died. And I buried her in silk. A silence passed. Then he whispered, so what are you now? I turned, eyes sharp. I'm the ending they never saw coming. He held my gaze. And this time when he reached for my hand, it wasn't to claim. It was to match. Fingers interlocked. Even. Not a chain. Not a leash. Just a choice. One I could release at any time. But I didn't. Because finally, after death, betrayal, rebirth, and war, I had the one thing no man had ever given me. The future I owned. The end.